Randolph Scott, George Randolph Scott, 1898 to 1987, was a towering icon of American cinema, a towering figure of 6'2", best known for his role as the unflappable Western hero, a symbol of justice and honor on screen. In a career that spanned from 1928 to 1962, he starred in over 100 films, including over 60 westerns, making him one of the most revered Western actors of all time. His career was marked by extraordinary consistency, cultivating an image of a strong, resilient man, a man who had seen it all but remained stoic. However, behind that dazzling aura and noble image, there existed a private life that had to be kept private, hidden from public scrutiny and the intense pressures of the times. Scott's real tragedy was not just keeping it secret, but is the forced living in the paradox between the idealized image of masculinity on screen and the truth inside. In a rare moment of candor, Scott later named 6 gay actors he knew, titans of the industry, who had to live secretly due to the harsh social norms of old Hollywood. Was career and fame worth more than a decade of discreet cohabitation with Cary Grant under the name Bachelor Hall? This hidden truth raises haunting questions about the price of fame and the hypocrisy of the era. Let's explore the intimate truth about Randolph Scott and his colleagues who endured the cultural pressures and the ruthless Hollywood system. George Randolph Scott was born on January 23, 1898, in Orange County, Virginia, and grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was the second of 6 children from a respected family of Scottish descent. His father, George Grant Scott, was the first certified public accountant in North Carolina, and his mother, Lucille Crane Scott, came from a wealthy family. The family's financial resources allowed Scott to attend private schools, including Woodbury Forest School. From a young age, Scott showed athletic talent, excelling in football, baseball, horse racing, and swimming. In July 1917, he joined the North Carolina National Guard and trained as an artillery observer during World War I. His unit, the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion, arrived in France in June 1918 and saw combat. After the armistice, he was commissioned a 2nd lieutenant in the artillery. This wartime experience informed his character and later acting career, especially his horsemanship and gunnery skills. After the war, Scott attended Georgia Tech, where he aimed to become an All-American football player, but a back injury prevented that. He then transferred to the University of North Carolina, where he studied engineering and textile manufacturing, but eventually dropped out to work as an accountant at his father's textile company. Around 1927, Scott became interested in acting and moved to Los Angeles to pursue a film career. Through his father's acquaintance with Howard Hughes, Scott got a letter of recommendation from the eccentric millionaire filmmaker, which landed him his first small role in Sharpshooters, 1928. Over the next few years, Scott worked as an extra and bit part, and even served as a dialect coach for Gary Cooper in The Virginian, 1929. On the advice of Cecil B. DeMille, Scott gained acting experience by participating in plays at the Pasadena Playhouse. In 1932, after a successful stage performance, Scott signed a 7-year contract with Paramount Pictures. Under his Paramount contract, Scott was quickly cast in the lead role in Heritage of the Desert, 1932, which established him as a Western hero. He went on to star in 10 Western B films based on Zane Grey novels, which film historian William K. Everson called uniformly good, an excellent training ground for both acting and action. In parallel, Paramount gave Scott non-Western roles, including the Other Man in Hot Saturday, 1932, where he met Cary Grant. Scott was also loaned to RKO to star in popular musicals with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, such as Roberta, 1935, and Follow the Fleet, 1936. His role as Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans, 1936, was his first undeniable A-picture success as a leading man. He also starred opposite Mae West in Go West, Young Man, 1936, and Irene Dunne in the musical High, Wide, and Handsome, 1937. After his Paramount contract ended, Scott signed with 20th Century Fox and starred in Jesse James, 1939, his first color film. He then moved to Warner Brothers to make Virginia City, 1940. Notably, Randolph Scott was one of the contenders for the role of Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind due to his Southern background, but the role eventually went to Leslie Howard. Throughout the 1940s, Scott appeared in numerous war films and other non-westerns, but by 1946 with Abilene Town, Scott had cemented his status as a cowboy hero, and from then on, only 2 of his marginal films were non-western. Scott's artistic peak came in the mid-1950s, when he collaborated with director Bud Boetticher and screenwriter Burt Kennedy. John Wayne suggested Scott replace him in 7 Men from Now, 1956, which opened the Renown cycle, named after Scott and Harry Joe Brown's production company. In this cycle of 7 films, which included The Tall T, 1957, Ride Lonesome, 1959, and Comanche Station, 1960, Boetticher created works of great beauty, precise structure, and elegant imagery, often using the distinctive landscapes of the California Sierras. Scott, as the hero of these stories, displays a calm, stoic humor, fighting against charming villains. These films are considered masterpieces of minimalist storytelling and psychological depth. Scott ended his film career at the age of 64 with Ride the High Country. The film, directed by Sam Peckinpah and co-starring Joel McCrea, also a Western actor, was a nostalgic look at the decline of the Old West, depicting the contrast between young and old, and was an elegant swan song that reflected Scott's departure from the screen. Randolph Scott's personal life, despite his fame, was kept private. He married twice. His first marriage to Marion DuPont, a wealthy heiress and equestrian, lasted from 1936 to 1939, and they had no children. Interestingly, Scott was the best man at Marion's first wedding. Despite the divorce, Marion DuPont kept the Scott name until her death in 1983, nearly 5 decades later. In 1944, Scott married for a second time to actress Patricia Stillman, who was 21 years his junior. This marriage lasted 43 years until his death. In 1950, they adopted 2 children, Sandra and Christopher. Their family life in Beverly Hills was described as stable, private, and away from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood partying, in stark contrast to the turbulent personal image of many of his colleagues. After retirement, Scott was a wealthy man, thanks to shrewd investments in real estate, oil, and stocks, amassing an estimated fortune of $100 million. Ironically, it was during the years when Scott was cementing his status as one of Hollywood's leading men and cultivating his image of the perfect masculinity, 1932 to 1944, that his private life took on a completely different aspect, becoming a hidden tragedy. Randolph Scott and actor Cary Grant met on the set of Hot Saturday, 1932. Soon after, they moved into a beach house in Malibu that became known as Bachelor Hall. They lived together intermittently for 12 years. Officially, Grant and Scott were just roommates. They were often photographed in casual settings, lounging by the pool or having meals together, giving a glimpse of a close friendship. Although both actors were married to women and tried to maintain the appearance of model bachelors or model husbands, speculation about the romantic nature of Scott and Grant's relationship has persisted for decades. The nature of the relationship is a subject of biographical controversy. The anomaly was the 12-year cohabitation, which lasted through Scott's first marriage to Marion DuPont and ended only when Scott married Patricia Stillman in 1944. That a major star would maintain such a long-lasting housemate relationship, especially with another rising star like Grant, has become something of a Hollywood myth. The hidden truth behind Bachelor Hall and the lives of many of his contemporaries was the cultural pressure and ruthless Hollywood system. In the Golden Age, coming out as gay could ruin a career instantly. The most important revelation, illuminating the personal tragedy of Scott's generation, was his late-life revelation. In a moment of candor, Randolph Scott named 6 gay actors he knew, giants of the industry, who had been forced to hide themselves from the public due to societal norms and studio pressure. Men forced to live in secrecy as revealed by Scott. 1. Cary Grant, Scott's closest and most painful connection. Grant and Scott shared a relationship that was rumored to be romantic, masked as friendship. For Scott, who kept Grant as a lifelong friend, hiding the truth was a painful necessity of the times. 2. Montgomery Clift, one of Hollywood's most sensitive actors, known for his tortured roles. Scott deeply empathizes with Clift, who is torn by internal conflict and the inability to live openly. 3. Merv Griffin, famous as a talk show host and entertainment mogul, but had to guard his private life meticulously. For Griffin, disclosure could have caused personal, financial, and corporate ruin at the time. 4. Jim Nabors. Beloved for his role as Gomer Pyle, Nabors had to manage his public image to avoid scandal, especially the malicious and false rumor that he was married to Rock Hudson. 5. Cesar Romero maintained a ladies' man image despite his homosexuality being an open secret within the company. Scott laments that Romero, a man of dignity, was deprived of his right to live and love freely. 6. Rock Hudson, perhaps the most tragic incarnation of harsh bondage. Hudson was the epitome of 1950s Hollywood masculinity, but his double life was carefully managed by his agent, Henry Wilson. The truth only came to light when he was diagnosed with AIDS in the 1980s, a turning point in social consciousness. Scott's acknowledgement of these friends is not mere gossip, but a tribute to their courage and an implicit condemnation of the rigid social norms that kept them silent. The tragedy of Randolph Scott and his colleagues stemmed from the complex interaction of three main groups of causes, which combined to create an unbearable pressure, forcing them to maintain a perfect shell. 1. Social and cultural causes. Moral standards. Hollywood at that time was governed by strict moral codes, where homosexuality was considered illegal, pathological, or scandalous. Public image. Scott specialized in playing the stoic Western hero, representing dignity and justice. This image was pure commercial gold, and any deviation was seen as a direct threat to the studio's earning power and the actor's career. The ideal masculinity of the 1950s, as in the image of Rock Hudson, was an imposed stereotype. Toxic publicity, the spread of rumors, such as the false myths about Jim Nabors and Rock Hudson, demonstrates a hostile and dangerous media environment for homosexuals. 2. Systemic causes, studio and financial. And studio pressure. Studios and agents, such as Henry Wilson, actively manage and cover up actors' personal lives to protect profits. For Scott, who was a consistently in-demand star from 1950 to 1953, his image was a business asset that needed to be protected. By asset protection. Merv Griffin, the media empire builder, understood that being outed could lead to not only personal, but also financial and corporate ruin. Randolph Scott was also a savvy businessman who amassed a huge fortune, and image stability was key to protecting these investments. 3. Personal and psychological causes. Need for privacy. Scott was known for keeping his private life quite private, even biologically. He maintained professionalism and discipline. And internal stress. Maintaining a double life caused great psychological stress, as in Montgomery Clift. Although Scott did not display the torment of Clift, 12 years of living in a contentious relationship and having to constantly cover it up, under the guise of Bachelor Hall, is evidence of emotional sacrifice. The moment of no return is not a physical breakdown, but a shattering of illusion. For Rock Hudson, it culminated in his AIDS diagnosis and death in 1985, forcing the truth about homosexuality into the public and Hollywood. For Randolph Scott, it was his retirement in 1962, ending the desperate need to maintain his image. Then, his speaking out, however belated, broke the collective silence of his generation, transforming him from a Western icon into a historical witness to oppression. The revelations about the secret lives of actors have had far-reaching consequences. For Scott, his relationship with Cary Grant remains a matter of biographical controversy, but his revelations reinforce the narrative of the invisible burdens borne by stars. Scott opted to leave the silver screen gracefully with Ride the High Country, retreating to a private family life in Beverly Hills and enjoying his fortune. He died in 1987 and is buried in Charlotte, North Carolina. His legacy, however, extends beyond Westerns to a reminder of hidden stars. His personal papers, housed at the UCLA Library Special Collections, continue to provide insight into both the professional and personal life of a man who lived in two worlds, one in the spotlight and one in the shadows. Randolph Scott achieved everything a Hollywood star of his time could desire: fame, immense wealth, and an indelible legacy as a stoic Western hero. His life was a combination of military discipline, business acumen, and artistic tenacity. Yet his personal tragedy, shared with friends like Cary Grant and Rock Hudson, was the price of silence imposed by an intolerant culture. He chose to remain silent during his career's peak to protect himself and his loved ones. But by the end of his life, his words about his colleagues who had lived in secret made him a powerful witness, implicitly condemning the system that forced them to hide their true selves. What questions does the hidden truth of Scott and other actors' private lives raise about our belief in public image and what we accept as truth? Is silence the ultimate form of protection, or is it the greatest tragedy of a generation forced to live under cover? Randolph Scott's legacy teaches us that sometimes a hero's greatest courage is not facing the villain on screen, but acknowledging the truth of another's invisible pain, even when that truth exposes a hidden part of one's own life.